All right, we are live with the Node.js CTC meeting for the 7th of December 2016. We have a decent amount of people present for this time of day, so let's do a stand-up, starting with Anna.
Yeah, so last week I was, like many of us, at Node Interactive in Austin, and I've been doing the code and learn bit there. And other than that, just general issue and pull request review. Let's see who's next. Nikita?
Just looked up something in the ecosystem about security stuff. Nothing else. Next is Colin.
I was at Node Interactive last week, and then just kind of reviewing all the issues and pull requests that came out of the code and learn. Nothing fancy. Next is Evan.
Evan said he'd be a couple minutes late.
Oh, he had already filled out the stand-up, so I think Jeremiah is next then.
Probably. So, I was at Node Interactive NA, did stuff at the Code and Learn, participated in a lot of discussions at the Collab Summit, as did many of us. I did the Node 7.2.1 release yesterday, and so much reviewing. I guess Josh is the next one that's on this call.
Yeah, pretty much the same as everyone else. Node Interactive and post-processing from that, getting notes up and stuff. Next is James here? Oh, I guess not. Michael Dawson.
Right. So like everybody else, Node Interactive. Also still trying to get Octane added to the benchmark run results and review miscellaneous review comments lands. Working a little bit on the process to get work groups more control over builds associated with their own work groups like Sitchin, so people being able to launch those jobs and so forth. And ongoing work on the ABI stable module front. Next is, I don't know if Julian or Michael Rogers is here. Not, then it's Brian White.
Not too much for me, just mostly reviewing PRs and commenting on issues. Next is Ali.
I was at Node Interactive as well, so not much else other than Node Interactive. Next would be Jen. I think the updates is no updates, just observing. So I think the next one would be Targosh.
Yes, nothing much for me. I reviewed some pull requests and commented on issues. And so nobody's next.
I'll go here. Just was at Node Interactive last week as well, and the VM Neutrality Summit, and just been circulating those summaries and takeaways from that with the team.
Who was that just went?
Oh, hey, that was Seth, and it looks like next up is Miles. Is Miles here? No. All right. After that,
Michael's also here. Targos?
Targos already went, I think so.
Okay. Miles, Queen. Let's just go with Bradley then.
Sure. So last week, and I've had a few meetings with Google and V8 about some parts of the changes to the spec and if they're actually doable. We're just going back and forth, mostly about if they can implement property delegation. So that'll be a few weeks in the making. So, yeah.
And I suppose Evan can go.
Yeah, for me, Node Interactive last week, and then just some issues and PRs. That's it.
Okay, so we don't have a super long agenda this week. There's a discussion about NPM that we're going to be having for upgrading to 4.0. When we'll do that. We're going to discuss the EP for the API Stable Module API, or NAPI, NAPI, Node API, I suppose that's the short form for. And then we're also going to talk moving Node in -inspect into core. So for the previous meeting, we discussed reverting the runtime deprecation of calling buffer without new. That has landed in 7.2.1, so that's closed out. Unless anyone has anything else to mention on that, we'll move into today's agenda. Okay, so deps upgrade npm to 4.0.2. I don't actually remember who tagged this. It might have been me. Was me. Okay. So the gist is that npm has gone to their next major, which means that 3.x is pretty much only going to be in maintenance mode, or their version of maintenance mode, which is pretty similar to ours, I think. So the question is really like, how much impact do we think? Well, I guess there's a couple questions. Like, how much impact do we think this will have? And then when do we want to do it? We haven't, I mean, we've sort of defined, because 3.x was like a big jump, but we haven't really had many of these. So I'm not sure if we've like hard locked in that this needs to be in a major, because it's not directly in our API. Yeah.
Do we like? Is it breaking versus? I guess it is because it's got a new version number, right?
Yeah. It's pretty much just really obscure edge cases. As far as I know.
Yeah, that's my impression too. Like, it's technically breaking, but I don't think anybody's code will be actually broken because of that.
I
Are
mean,
we talking about putting it in V7, or what versions are we talking about putting npm4 in, or Bone?
If I remember correctly, the plan on the NPM side of things was to get V5 out in the first quarter of 2017. So if we do this in a major, we might not even do a release with npm v4 at all, I think.
Yeah, they did indicate that that V5 is probably not going to be a particularly large jump either. So I think we're discussing between V7 and V8, maybe V6, but I don't think we'd want to do this in an LTS release. But for a current release, it might be okay to do. It's not really part of our API.
I think it becomes difficult. I know yesterday I saw that there was an issue, and they had considered not backporting it to version 3, but I think they ended up backporting it to version 3. So I think that is something we need to take into account. Like, if version 3 is just maintenance mode and they're not going to be doing any more releases on it, then if there is a broken one, we would either have to like float a patch or go with the whatever one's being maintained.
I've been messaged that they're going to do like maintenance bug fixes on it, or like just kind of like fixes in general to like an extent, but not like new features or anything.
Right, because it's in V6, in our Node 6, right?
Yeah.
Right, so they're going to have to, we're going to have that same issue. I guess the question is what's the advantage of putting it into Node 7 as opposed to waiting to bumping it when we make a Node 8. It should land in master regardless, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Is there anyone that feels like it could go into V6? I mean, I'm not really too sure.
I was
Yeah, I don't think we should do that.
No, I don't think that. I'm just wondering, like, do we even need to put it into V7? Like,
What if we cut releases with both versions? Like a V6 with NPM 3 and NPM 4.
I think it would be simpler to, like, I don't know, tell users just to install npm on top of that rather than doing that. That seems
Right,
like awfully complicated to the build pipeline.
yeah. And the other thing is they can, like, if people want to try out the new version 4, they can install it, right? It's just whether we should give it to everybody who has 7, like basically force it on everybody who has 7, or should we wait until December major to do that? Is NPM suggesting we should, or?
It seemed to be that they were.
So what I have heard personally was that A, they don't feel pretty strongly about getting it into V7 or not, and B, everybody should use NPM 4. Like, no matter whether that update comes from Node because of the version we are packaging or just because they want to update.
Everybody hopes for that. So, I mean, in terms of always using people using their latest.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess I haven't heard any compelling reason to put it into V8. Sorry, into Node 7.
I think like the only real reason would be that, well, I guess there's two reasons. Number one, it is a little bit of a transition so that when npm 5 comes out, and if we do that in V8, and if there's a little bit more breakage delta, well, some of that's kind of like already been taken care of. And the other thing is like, I mean, our current branches are essentially for features, and I mean, it would maybe be nice to get like, new npm features, I guess, that ship by default. I mean, I don't really think like that that like installing it particularly is like any amount of lock-in, because once you've installed, like, if you've globally installed npm after that, like, you're going to, I think, default to that even if you reinstall a new version of Node.
I think it's something that we should definitely like keep on our radar, at least at a minimum.
I mean, I would be totally fine with landing it in V7 because those breaking changes, they are, like Jeremiah said, they are really edge casey kinds of things. And one of them is actually by me, and nobody's code is going to be broken by that. Like, except in really weird edge cases, but it's technically even kind of a revert, so whatever.
Well, by reading the list of breaking changes, I see that npm tag has been removed after a deprecation cycle, so that could break someone's workflow.
Right. Okay. So are we pretty settled on not doing this in V7 then, or should we bring it back? I feel like there's a couple people who might be like vocal on this who aren't attending this meeting.
Does it make sense to take it back to GitHub and like maybe you can see those particular people asking if they have an opinion?
Okay, let's do that. Okay, well, unless anyone else has something to say about that, I guess we'll move on to the EP for an API.
Right. So I can lead the discussion on that one.
Actually, can we do debugger first? Because actually I have to drop off in 7 minutes.
Sure. Yeah, let's do node inspect first then.
Sure.
Take it away, whoever's leading it.
Hi, this is Rich. I'm the one who put this on the agenda, but if Jan is here, he can probably better frame it, and Ali can probably better frame it as well. So I prefer they set up the discussion. But basically, JSON API going away, and in the version of V8 that we expect to ship with version 8. Therefore, we got to figure out what we're doing with the current debugger because it's not going to keep working.
Right. So yeah. So as Rich mentioned, there's the Jan. I don't, if you want to jump in, let me know. Otherwise, I'll keep going. So the old debug protocol has been deprecated for 2 years, and we had just removed it in V8 5.7. So by the Node version 8 timeframe, the old debugger protocol will no longer be there, and our CLI debugger is currently built on top of that protocol. So we need to stop using that protocol. We do have the V8 inspector protocol, and a new debugger can be built on top of the V8 inspector protocol. And we actually have one that Jan has built based on the new protocol. So now we have some interesting questions, whether we want to continue having, so if we want to continue having, first of all, whether we want to continue having a CLI debugger in Node core itself. Secondly, whether we want to not have it in core, have it separately, that works with the new protocol, but ship it and bundle it along with Node core the same way we do for NPM, for example. Or we can say, actually, this is something people can externally install from NPM if they need to use a CLI debugger. And there has been some debate about whether or not it makes sense to have a debugger that comes by default with your Node installation. Some people feel very strongly about it, but other people feel that actually we haven't maintained the old debugger for years. So just having it in core doesn't mean, it is not necessarily a good thing. In fact, decoupling it may encourage people to collaborate on it more. There's a gray area on whether or not it should be bundled by default or not. I used to have strong feelings. I no longer have strong feelings on it, but other people do. That's my framing. Jan or Rich, if you want to add something, feel free.
No, that sums it up.
So I mentioned this in the thread, but I kind of am not very clear on what bundling it would be like, because, well, does bundling mean it would be like Node and then using inspect like argument to Node would bring it up, or would it just install like Node inspect globally somewhere as a global Node module? Or like would bundling it make it like, be just that argument like pulls up the bundled version? What do we mean?
I guess we have a I don't think that has been clarified on the issue. I think we will have some options here. One of them is that actually, can you hold on for a second? Actually, I have to drop off for a second.
I was actually gonna reply on that issue to you, Jeremiah, so I'll just say it here. One way we could do it is put it in depths and then either put it behind an abstraction that gets called when you do node debug or node inspect, or like an if-def statement or something that is behind a build flag. But like the core thing could be in depths, but it could still be surfaced. It seems to me from the current node debug. That's an option.
Right. Yeah. Sorry about dropping off. So whether we keep it the exact same option, or we say, well, instead of using node space debug, you need to use node dash debug or something. As long as it's available as part of a node installation by default, I think we have some flexibility because we are doing a similar major change in which we're going to drop this. So I think we do have some flexibility on how we want to bundle it if we do want to bundle it.
Yeah, I think the core discussion was around, like, should it just be there so you don't have to install anything else, or is it okay to, you know, have it as a separate module that you can install when needed?
Right. To clarify, and we should make sure everyone's on board with this. We did say that one way or the other, we think node inspect should be in the foundation, and a repo in Node.js. And just the question would be if it's bundled or embedded in core. So if anyone is opposed to being in foundation, let us know. But we're going to recommend that to the TSC.
I wonder how many people actually use the command line debugger versus some other solution.
So I actually made a totally unscientific Twitter survey on that. And it appears about 20% of people who replied said they would use it, which, scale to 5 million people is actually a million. So probably not an exact number, but quite a few. Also, quite a few don't just know about the debugger at all.
I think I would prefer if we at least bundle it.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of already set a precedent, like whether we like it or not, of having this sort of debugger in core, and like kind of, I don't know, the debugging story for Node.js is not like super great, so I think like removing that is not like a particularly good move.
I would agree
like
here.
So actually, there are some complexities. So there are some complexities on the topic of bundling. So for example, so right now when we send SIG user 1 or 2, I forget which one, that starts the old debug protocol, and that debug protocol is going away. So so those aspects we're probably going to have to deprecate, right? So in the sense that when you get the signal, we only have the new protocol that we can enable. We can no longer surface the old protocol. So those parts we'll have to. And if we are bundling it, I mean, yeah. So this, I guess, this slightly.
So, I would just like to make a small correction. If you have the inspect flag turned on and you send the SIG user 1, it calls for try start debugger, which will use the newer protocol if the inspect flag is set as well.
Well, if you say inspect, then it starts it with the debugger, so it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like the process started with it on.
Correct, but we have precedent that SIG user 1 does not always start the old protocol.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, if we're doing this in the
I'm
breaking
not
change,
sure if
like
that's
we can
the
just
same conversation though. I just wanted to mention that. SIG user 1 stuff.
Yeah, actually, this is slightly tangential. So sorry for bringing this up at the same time. I think we can keep the discussion separate on whether or not we should bundle it by default or not, and what SIG user 1 does. I think we can tackle independently.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So actually, I have to drop off now.
Okay, thanks. So is there anyone that has like an idea, or like has any like reasoning why not bundling it would be better than bundling it, but like bundling a user land solution, even if it's not like in core per se?
I think that somebody made a pretty good point. I can't remember who it was, but on the issue tracker about it getting stale or out of date. Whereas if it is bundled, then whatever version of Node that you're using, you'll have that. You'll have the debugger that works with it out of the box. I think that's a pretty fair point. I mean,
yeah, I also think having it there, like, it's one of those fundamental things that, you know, if you're in production and need it or something like that, it's not always easy to get it installed. So having one built in by default, there's a certain set of tools that having built in by default just do make sense. I think the flip side argument that I heard at the Collaborator Summit was, you know, the keeping Node Core small, and even though it's shipped as, you know, user land, it's still something that now becomes, you know, sort of part of what we've said is going to be there going forward.
Is the node and spec thing, is that exactly the same as the current debugger as far as like API and how it behaves and all that kind of stuff?
I think there are some minor differences due to the console API wrapper, but that's it. I can tell.
Okay, but going back to my question, is there anyone that sees a win by having it not bundled compared to bundling some externally maintained solution? I understand there's like differences between maintaining it in core and maintaining it somewhere else and bundling it, but is there like any actual win that anyone can see from not bundling it, considering, well, especially considering we've already like had Node debug for forever pretty much?
I think
I would go to the embedded.
Sorry, yeah. So one argument that was made was that if it is bundled in 8.0 and it turns out to be a mistake, it's hard to remove it. So because if it is released with 8.0, then it has to stick around for a long, long time. So one question would be if it would make sense to delay bundling it until 8.x.
So, as the person who made that argument, I think that is less compelling. It's a less compelling argument if we're talking about, you know, treating Node and Spec kind of like we treat NPM, like something that we ship with, you know, but it's not included in the actual Node binary.
And I know there were some people on the embedder side of things that had feelings about it. I don't know their arguments, so we may want to find someone like, I don't know, from NodeBots to talk about this.
I feel like we need more community input.
I kind of feel like we're already past the was this a mistake or not point, because I mean, we're pretty much just replicating Node debug, and I feel like in that future, if we had it bundled or in core, Node debug would be an alias to Node inspect. So I think I don't know, from my point of view, I think like stuck in that ship and don't really have as much of a choice to bundle this or not. I mean, even if it's a little bit different, we're mostly continuing having the same existing functionality or same general functionality.
And when you say node inspect, do you mean node inspect not the flag, but like the command?
Yes.
Okay.
Jan, I think, had some issues about aliasing node inspect to node debug, but I don't remember what they were. So that's kind of an invitation for him to speak up if he has them.
Yeah, so my argument against aliasing node debug directly is because there is this thing with remote debugging. So if you install Node 8 and you try to remote debug something on a server running Node 6 or Node 4, then it suddenly behaves very differently between 6 and 8 in a surprising and potentially misleading way, where it just would give random protocol errors that are hard to understand. And if there's two different commands, like node debug does one thing, node inspect does a completely different thing in terms of protocol at least, I would think that it's less confusing. Also, just because someone brought it up earlier, node-debug as a command name would be problematic because that is what Node Inspector, the third-party module, currently uses to start a node process and opening up the browser.
Actually, a really interesting point that even if we deprecate the debugger, well, what is our story for using a later node runtime to debug an earlier one? Maybe we have to extract out the current debugger to like a node old debugger or something, and people could just use that on its own as a module for 8 and later, because I mean, how long is that going to go?
So what's the path forward? I mean, it sounds like we need, sounds like we need community input, but it also sounds like we need to make a decision sooner rather than later. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think like as far as we talk about like including node inspect in some way in core, I think we have consensus on that. I mean, I personally would prefer the just ship it like we do with npm solution, and just remove all of the old debugger stuff. I mean, I guess somebody could try to open up a PR with that, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I think along those lines. So it's like create the CTC issue, or so the TSC issue, to move the repo under the foundation, since that's what it sounds like we have a consensus on, and then the PR for doing the other thing would be the way to get the conversation going on the second step.
I don't really feel that side of things is that pressing, but we do need to make some sort of decision about what to do with node debug in V7 and maybe V6.
Yeah, we need to. One of the takeaways from last week was to open an issue for that.
Yeah. I think Ali said in the thread that he might be able to actually get removing it delayed until after version 8, which would really be preferable. We might be able to then deprecate it in version 8 and have the new thing there. Otherwise, I think we're kind of forced to deprecate it in version 7, whether or not it's in a current release branch or not, and possibly bring node inspector into, like, if we're going to do that, then we could discuss having that as like an experimental feature, maybe in version 7, so people can already iron out some of the bugs.
And just to state the obvious, every time you said deprecate, you meant a runtime deprecation, because the doc deprecation can happen whenever.
Yeah, yes, runtime deprecation, because it will be imminent in the next version.
All right, well, I don't think we can make a decision on that without Ali's input. But I think, yeah, let's get that as soon as we can. And I guess Jan, does what we've talked about inside today give you what you need to start moving forward with whatever it is you need to do with Node Inspector? Do we need to make more precise decisions about how it's going to work?
So the one question that actually affects work on Node Inspect itself is, so right now, the way that the code is structured is optimized for not making a decision whether it is in core or it would be bundled. So I think that there is a rough consensus that if it would move into Node, if it would be bundled like NPM, which would also simplify the code structure in Node Inspect, because it wouldn't be constrained to basically dumping everything in one big file. So if there's consensus about that, that would be great for moving forward.
Now, the one question on that front is, would those refactors prevent you from also installing a newer version, though? Like doing an npm install the later one?
No, it would be just inside of the module, like the source code itself, just splitting it up into multiple files inside of the package.
So I want to be clear on something. Bringing it into core in a non-bundled way does not mean it needs to all be in one file. We have internal module folders, and all kinds of components can be split off into those without worry of exposing them.
Yes, yes. So I'm aware and I had that structure, but it makes it a little bit harder to split out. Like if it is developed outside of core right now, like it is way easier to test copying one file in and not being worried about naming conventions and prefixing the magical files in internal that are not actually, what belongs to what is a little bit harder to see if you split it up into different files. But yeah, I know that it would be possible to split those up, but at least at this stage where I'm developing it in a separate repository, it was a lot easier to put it into one file because it was easier to copy it over and to test it.
But couldn't we use like a module bundler to make one big file and put it in lib?
Yes, so I experimented with something like rollup and also like browserify, the obvious ones. The thing is, then you end up with a clearly bundled file, which looks a little bit awkward. That might be just aesthetics, but it seemed a bit hacky. But yeah, so I think there was a rough consensus which gets us around the whole discussion that if it would be bundled in core, it would most likely be npm-like, not inside of lib. Right?
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that as long as there's something there for the end user, that's the, when they install Node, that they don't have to go and install something else themselves. That's the important part, and that the rest of it, whether or not it's included in the Node binary or whether it's treated like we do npm, that can actually be a decision based on what's easiest to maintain and et cetera, et cetera. At least that's my impression from this conversation.
Yeah,
Any
that might
different
be
impression?
true.
That's good.
I have to see that this conversation has been way more productive than I expected, so thank you all.
Someone from the live stream chat says that their ops team would say no to for sure to installing on a production box from something that wasn't bundled.
Do they mean bundled inside the executable or sidecar?
My impression, well, they specified if not bundling meant that, so I'm under the impression it doesn't matter whether it's sidecard or in the executable.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that something needs to ship. Go ahead, whoever that was.
Yeah, just so everybody knows that the possibility exists, we can include the debugger, even if we ship it as a separate thing, can also include it in the executable. It's really not huge. And I think we really do that for some of the V8 tools like Tick Processor that we have. Those are also like taken from depths V8 and just included as multiple files in our Node binary.
I think this is probably going to be something that'll be a lot easier to make decisions on if we can get something happening in nightly or something or whatever, something that we can actually compile and play with and make available to the community to evaluate.
Yeah, that seems like a good option.
Yeah, sorry I'm late.
So are we okay just kind of delegating this to diagnostics and just please make it happen, that kind of thing?
We should. Well, I mean, it would be good if we define someone to work on it. Jan, do you want to get that into core? Do you want to do the PR into core?
Sure, I can do that. I mean, the first step would be to get it into the foundation. I mean, right now, so I am fairly confident in everything working and the code being okayish, but the first step I think would be to actually have someone else look at the code and tell me what I did terribly wrong. That I think having more confidence in the project itself would be a precondition to create the PR into core. I'm not sure if that makes sense or if that could happen as part of the PR to core.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. Would that would probably get a lot of people to look at it.
When you say a PR to core, that's the PR to get it to be bundled into core, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
The very first step is to get the PR on the CTC repo to say, let's move this under the foundation.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why both can happen simultaneously. TSC repo to get it into the foundation, and then a PR on the main repo to put it in depths and make it available to the end user.
Yep, sure.
And I'm happy to make some time to work on that, but I'm probably not the best person, honestly. There are no doubt better qualified people on diagnostics and elsewhere, but if nobody else is like available, I'll figure something out. But and I suspect, although I also suspect Jan won't have a hard time doing it. But
yeah,
just to get eyes on it.
Yeah, so I can definitely just create a PR to get a discussion started, moving it into depths and just seeing what people think. I would appreciate if someone else could do the like CTC or TSC thing, because I'm just not familiar enough with the processes and like how to do that part.
Josh,
yeah, I was planning on doing that.
Great.
Okay. Well, unless anyone else has something really important to say about that, we should move on to the last agenda item while we have time. So who wants to start for the EP for NAPI?
Yeah, I can talk to that. So basically that EPS is in draft state, and the goal was to get it landed not as, this is what the final shape of the API is going to be, but to have some information and a starting point for people to go take a look at what's being worked on. It kind of stalled out in some of the comments in terms of, the latest comments were some people, was one individual basically asking for it to be more completely finished before we did that. The discussion in the collaborator summit was that, it likely should just land as it is, and then it can be, worked on as we move forward, because in draft it's not intended to answer all the questions and be, fully complete. And it was brought, tagged as CTC to come back to this group to say, it would be good if people took a look at it and either said, yes, we agree with that direction forward, or no, we need to do something else.
So
go ahead.
Maybe we could put the call to vote on GitHub. I know that Ben had some concerns, but yeah, that's all I had to say. Someone else.
He had some very specific comments, so I actually transferred those comments to issues in the ABI stable node repo, because there are things we can change, but there's going to be lots and lots of those. So one thought I had is we're far enough along now that we potentially could just remove the part of the doc that actually specifies the functions and point them to the file in the repo as a, hey, you can go look here. Earlier on, that section was, we don't have anything. Here's a flavor of what it might look like, but we've made enough progress that we actually have our working prototype. So we could just point there, and any comments like he's made can be raised in that issue in terms of you should change this or change that, and we're already working on addressing some of those, but I don't know that they need to be tied specifically to the EPS itself, because there will still be lots of changes to the specific API calls before it's comes back for a vote in terms of landing it for real. But I guess you're suggesting we just go back, if people can go back and give it the thumbs up in terms of landing it in the GitHub issue itself, right?
That seems the most reasonable to me.
Sounds good. And one additional update: the V8 team has kicked off a discussion internally, and we're going to be submitting issues to the repo and trying to collect all of our feedback in one place.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Like an issue on the ABI stable repo is the best place to put that, so we can have the team discuss it and start to, if it's like change this API call to have different options or whatever, we can start actually implementing that piece, those suggestions.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll try to get those landed as soon as possible.
Okay.
Or the issues filed.
Yeah, Michael. Following the discussions last week, have you received any comments from anybody saying this is just the wrong direction to go?
No, I haven't had anything along those lines. There was an issue open on somebody saying they're looking at something completely different. It was like nbind, which is a dynamic set of bindings. So I gave them some pointers to look at what we're doing, and in that case, I think that might be more of an overlap with FFI because it looked like it was dynamically generating the code for a certain library. So we'll work through how those suggestions map or don't map to the different options.
Yeah, and just I'm not sure if it was mentioned. I had to pop away for just a second, but the along with this work, just so everyone's aware, there the folks at Google are working on an FFI based approach for simplifying native module development. They were hoping to have a demo that they could show off how it works within the next couple of weeks, but what we're going to try to do is probably by end of January, February, March timeframe, right in there, have something where we can compare the the NAPI and the FFI approach, kind of see where those are at. So there may be another EPS coming with the FFI stuff in the not too distant future.
And just to add, they may end up being complementary. So I don't think we wanted to position them as in competition or anything.
Yeah.
Right.
So what do you need? What's needed from us at the meeting?
I think the request is for people to go into the issue and say, yeah, let's land this as is, or in terms of it being a draft, or I guess disagreeing and suggesting something else.
And as a note, if you're on the CTC and you do not plan on reading it and expressing an opinion, it's probably a good idea to say that in there so that if we do end up tallying votes or whatever, that makes it require fewer yay votes to pass.
I don't see why we would really vote on it except to accept or reject it.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, okay, I guess this is like sort of a process question, but is there anything that really stops a proposal from just like landing in draft form ever?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think there was just, there was some community, or at least one community comment that said, hey, we need you to rewrite the whole thing. I think it was brought back to, if the CTC says no, we should just go ahead, then we'll just do that, right? And I don't know that we need a formal vote, but we were looking for consensus that that's the right thing to do. Maybe it's a call to, if you object to that, then go comment there.
I don't know of anyone who would off the top of my head, other than like maybe those who think FFI is a better idea. I'm not sure if that was like a complementary idea or sort of a replacement for that. Otherwise, I'm not really sure there's much other options.
Right. Current discussion was they're complementary, so. And the outcome of the discussion at the meeting was, yes, we should just go do that. And then, was added to the CTC agenda, I guess, just to confirm that there weren't objections. If we've got enough people here and we don't think we need to do anything further, then we could just proceed based on the agreement. We could basically say it was we raised it to the CTC meeting. There were no objections, so we're going to go forward.
I'd say go ahead and move ahead with it as a draft unless anyone else has other feelings about it.
Anyone who objects can do so on the issue, so yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it a few days and then I'll just go ahead and do it. Okay, that's probably it then.
All right. We have a couple minutes. If there's any other questions from those who are watching, if you could please put in the YouTube chat, or IRC, we'll be watching those for a couple minutes. So in the meantime, upcoming meetings. There only seems to be 2 listed here. Next week, on Wednesday again, there will be a CTC meeting at 2000 UTC. Which I believe was the normal original, or not necessarily normal, but the original meeting time. And then there will be a TSC meeting next week on Thursday, which was still on its regular meeting time of 2000 UTC. Usually I thought we had a couple other working group meetings listed here, but maybe that's on the TSC one.
There usually are, but I don't know if any more are scheduled right now. But if somebody does, drop them in.
Okay, well, I put a call for questions already earlier, so I think we're good. Thanks, everyone. I don't know if we have anything to speak about in private after this, but so stick around for a minute then. Right, thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremiah.